A scream cut through the morning wind, sharp as glass, then vanished into the wheat like it had never existed. Elias heard it from his saddle, a single echo that made his chest seize. He'd been riding for days, hungry and half-lost, but that sound pulled him upright as if it knew his name. He turned his horse toward it without thought. Men who've lost everything don't look for danger, they follow ghosts. He found her by instinct more than sight. The field was endless and whispering, the color of dying gold. And there she was, small, still, bound to a wooden post like some cruel offering to the wind. Her head hung forward, her wrists raw where the ropes bit into them. She wasn't crying. She wasn't fighting. Just standing there in silence, as if she'd accepted that no one would come. Elias slid from his horse and stepped closer, boots sinking into damp earth. The air smelled of rain and wheat and something older, something heavy with sorrow. He had seen death before, seen men left in worse ways, but this was different. This was deliberate humiliation dressed as mercy. He took his knife and cut through the ropes. Her body slumped into his arms, light but solid, like a prayer half answered. When she opened her eyes, they were the color of smoke after rain. She looked at him, as if uncertain he was real. Her voice came rough and small, a sound that trembled at the edges. "You shouldn't have helped me." He didn't ask why. He only lifted her onto his horse and led them toward the hills, the sun already fading behind thickening clouds. He spoke no words, but his hands were steady, careful. He'd once held his dying wife this way, too afraid to let go, too aware it wouldn't matter. At his cabin, he built a fire and gave her water. She drank like one who'd forgotten how. Her name, she said later, was Lena. She didn't explain the ropes, nor who had left her there. The words came slow, guarded, like stones she was reluctant to throw into still water. Elias didn't press her. He had learned that pain resents questions. Days turned into a quiet rhythm. She moved through his home softly, never in the way, her presence like smoke from a candle, there and not there. She mended what was broken, hummed to herself in a language he didn't know, and stared often toward the fields. He caught her once tracing the rope marks on her wrists, not in pity, but in remembrance. He recognized that look. He'd worn it for years. Elias wasn't a cruel man, just hollowed out. The drought had taken his herd, the fever had taken his family, and time had taken whatever softness he'd had left. But Lena's silence changed the air around him. She reminded him what it felt like to breathe for someone else's sake. Still, there was distance in her eyes, a horizon he couldn't cross. When he finally asked why she'd been left out there, she said only this: "Because men are afraid of what they don't understand." Then she smiled faintly, a fragile thing that disappeared before it reached her eyes. The town began whispering soon after. A stranger woman living under Elias Cole's roof. A half-native witch with cursed eyes. The talk rode faster than wind through the wheat, carried by mouths that needed meaning for what they feared. He ignored it at first. Then the ranch foreman, McCrae, came riding one evening with 2 men and a sneer that smelled of whiskey. He told Elias the woman was trouble, that the land didn't take kindly to her kind. Said she'd brought bad luck, crops dying, cattle falling sick. His laughter had an edge to it, the kind that comes before violence. Elias stood at his door and said nothing. McCrae spat into the dust and rode off, promising to return if the witch wasn't gone by dawn. Inside, Lena sat by the fire, her face lit by the smallest flame. She looked at him and said quietly, "They'll come again." Her voice held no fear, only tired certainty. Elias met her gaze and felt something move inside him, a weight he thought long dead. "Then let them come," he said. Outside, the wind began to rise, brushing the wheat like fingers across a drum. In the distance, thunder murmured. The light flickered between them, casting their shadows against the wall, 2 broken silhouettes standing together against the dark. And for the first time in years, Elias felt the ache of something alive, dangerous, and unspoken taking root beneath his ribs. He didn't yet know if it was courage or love. Only that it would cost him both. The knock came before sunrise, 3 hard strikes that made the cabin tremble. Elias rose from his chair, the rifle already in his hands. The storm had passed overnight, leaving behind a sky heavy with silence. He opened the door to find no man there. Only a small bundle of sage burning in the dirt, the smoke curling upward like a warning. Lena stood behind him, pale as the ash on the hearth. Her eyes said what her lips would not. They had come, and they would come again. By noon, the horizon rippled with movement. 3 riders, dark shapes against the light, threading through the wheat with cruel purpose. McCrae led them, his laughter carrying ahead like a whip crack. Elias stepped out to meet them, heart steady, mouth dry. The wind tangled his hair, tugged at his shirt. He had nothing left to lose, but for the first time in years, he had something to protect. McCrae dismounted, boots sinking into the mud. His men stayed back, hands near their guns. "You should have listened, Cole," he said, voice smooth as poison. "That woman's cursed. You'll bring the plague back on this land." Elias didn't answer. He looked past McCrae to the wheat swaying behind him, gold and fragile as faith. "She's no curse," he said finally. "Just another thing this land tried to bury alive." The first punch came without warning. McCrae's fist cracked against Elias's jaw, sharp and hot. Elias staggered but didn't fall. The second blow came harder, fueled by fear disguised as righteousness. Blood filled his mouth, copper and salt. McCrae's men watched, uncertain now. Violence never looked noble when the victim refused to fight back. Lena appeared in the doorway, her white dress bright against the storm-dark sky. She didn't scream or plead. She simply stepped forward, her hands raised, her voice calm but cutting. "He saved me," she said. "Would you have done the same?" The question hung in the air like smoke, and none of them answered. McCrae turned toward her, eyes blazing. "You think you can shame us, witch?" he spat. "You think we fear your spells?" But something in her gaze made him falter. Not magic. Memory. The kind of truth that makes men flinch. She said softly, "You tied me there. You left me for the crows." The silence that followed was deep and terrible. McCrae's men shifted in their saddles, guilt flickering like lightning behind their eyes. Elias wiped the blood from his chin and took a step forward. "You're done here, McCrae." The rancher sneered, but the moment had turned. He swung up onto his horse, muttering curses, and the 3 rode off without looking back. The field swallowed them whole. The wind changed direction, gentler now. That night, the cabin glowed with quiet. Lena knelt by the fire, mixing herbs into a small bowl, her fingers stained with the green of crushed leaves. She pressed the poultice against Elias's jaw, her touch steady and warm. "You shouldn't have stood for me," she whispered. He smiled crookedly. "You said the same when I found you." Her hand paused. "And you still haven't learned." For a while, neither spoke. The rain began again, soft against the roof. It sounded almost kind. When she finally spoke, her words came low and certain. "I can't stay." Elias felt the sentence like a blade between the ribs. He didn't ask where she'd go, he already knew. She belonged to the wind, to the spaces between belonging and exile. In the days that followed, she grew distant again. He found her once standing in the field where he'd first found her, the post still leaning against the sky. She touched it with a strange tenderness, as if forgiving it. "The land remembers everything," she said. "Even the pain." He watched her, wishing words could hold her like his arms never could. When the fire came 2 nights later, it began in McCrae's barn. The flames rose high, wild as vengeance. They said Lena cursed him. They said she vanished into the smoke. Elias rode toward the burning horizon, searching, shouting her name until his throat tore raw. He found only ashes and the faint scent of sage. He never saw her again. Some said she ran north to her people. Others said the fire took her. But on quiet mornings, when the wheat moves like water and the sky holds its breath, Elias swears he hears her humming, low, tender, unbroken. He stands by the old post, his hand resting on the splintered wood. The wind carries her voice through the fields, a promise stitched into the air. He closes his eyes and whispers back, almost smiling. I learned.